All right, got to get a couple green check marks in here. Got to make sure I find the right ones. There's so many of them. All right, now we got to wait for a couple green check marks. Hope everybody's having a good time as we get some viewers in here and going. And looks like we got green check marks across the board, and we are good to go.
Awesome. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers, your ultimate Broncos podcast for your latest and greatest on your Denver Broncos. I'm Kenneth Booker, and here with me, as always, is Mr. Erick Trickel. How you doing, Eric? How'd you enjoy that game last night?
I didn't watch much of it last night. I kind of got sidetracked. I was talking. It's been a long week. So starting on Saturday was Shrine Bowl practices, so I was up early watching those. And then Tuesday Senior Bowl practices started. So between Tuesday, Saturday, and Thursday, I probably was putting in 20-hour days,
Oh, wow.
watching over practices and all that and stuff. Um, so I have access to, all 22 tape of the practices. So I'm able to go and break those down. So it's been a long week. So I didn't watch much of the game last night. I watched it back most of it this morning. Going through the coaches film on it, the all 22 and the end zone angles. A lot of guys standing out. I'm excited to get into talking about it, as well as a Senior Bowl, the practices with those, but the game is tomorrow. But before we get into that, there is actually news that came out not long before we started on here. Ian Rappaport, they came out. It broke. Well, let me start with it broke earlier today that it seems like the New Orleans Saints are zeroing in on Kellen Moore to be their next head coach. They have informed other candidates that they are no longer, partaking. And then I think like the Monday after the Super Bowl, the Saints have it set up with Kellen Moore for another meeting.
Okay.
Now, the trickle down effect of that is Darren Rizzi. He was one of those guys that was still in the running for the New Orleans Saints head coaching job. And word is he was kind of waiting to see what happened there. And almost immediately after that, we get this tweet from Ian Rappaport. As the Saints zero in on Kellen Moore, slated to have another conversation with the team after the Super Bowl, interim coach Darren Rizzi is likely to become the new Denver Broncos special teams coordinator, sources say, back with Sean Payton and an important hire. In another tweet, he says, Darren Rizzi has been the favorite in Denver for some time, though the Broncos will conduct a full and complete search for the new special teams coordinator. So it doesn't sound like it's complete yet, but it is as we expected, as we talked about weeks ago. It seems like Darren Rizzi's their guy. They're just going to, do their due diligence.
Whose decision do you think it is? Do you think it's up to him to come to Denver, or is it Denver to bring him in? Like, who wants to be here more, do you think?
I think obviously Sean Payton wants him in Denver. And I think if he doesn't, depending on what happens with New Orleans, because that's his home, he's been there for so long. I think maybe there's a chance if Kellen Moore says we want you to stay in as our special teams coordinator. There's a chance I think he can see that, but it's unlikely. You don't see interim coaches not get the head coaching job and then come back often. It has happened a couple times, not very often. So outside of that happening, I think it's Denver for him, but staying in New Orleans is still an option.
Definitely. Hopefully that all works out, whatever, because it seems like everybody's super hyped about Darren Rizzi. I need to do a little more homework on him, but it's always good to have the guy that you want instead of the guy that you got stuck with, essentially.
Yeah.
Then we got some people coming in here earlier today. We got Dylan always says, "Sup, Broncos country? Make sure you hit that like button on the way in, share on all the platforms, and subscribe if you haven't already." We got Pearl. How you doing, Pearl? And then evening. So PS2 won the defensive player of the year, or did I read that wrong? So I guess it's not it was an AP defensive player of the year.
It's not the Associated Press one. Yeah. It is the Fox on NFL one. But it's a good indicator that he has of his chances of winning the AP one. But we won't find out that until Thursday at the NFL honors, unless it leaks beforehand, which it'll leak sometime Thursday morning, as the awards always do.
And you got Casey Nickel coming in here and says, "Go Broncos, get that legend Riz." And then you got Chase Wellner, DVDD, fist pound. All right. So after the whole Darren Rizzi stuff news came out, is there any other coaches you think that the Broncos are keying in on, or is it Darren Rizzi is the big one, and then just making sure to keep Vance around, I guess.
Um, I'm not sure what else is out there. Um, and then of course you never know what way they're looking at. So
Mhm.
special
Yeah.
teams is it's hard.
So the first thing we're going to talk about today was the Shrine Bowl. I was able to watch that yesterday. It was pretty cool. I really like their rules.
Mhm.
They got a little bit on the defense, the rules. I really like you got to go for two. It makes it much more interesting, and you get to see. I don't know. Those goal line plays are pretty interesting because they're really hard to pull off
Yeah.
because room is so tight and everybody's just right on top of each other, and it's just all about timing and those rub routes and stuff like that. So how did they do the defense? It's something with the zones. They can only do certain zones, and they can blitz, right? And it can only
Yeah.
be the front four.
They can't blitz. There's only certain coverages you can use. And it's the same thing at the Senior Bowl. They just limit it, and it's all player safety stuff. When you blitz,
Oh, okay.
there's increased chances of players getting hurt. Certain zone coverages, I think they do that not for injuries, but just because of complexity.
Okay.
And just coming in not being unsure of this, learning new playbooks, learning new things for a lot of these guys. Just simple things to make it nice and easy for them.
Yeah, it was. I guess maybe it's somewhere aesthetically pleasing, and everything just runs a lot smoother. Then we got some game standouts. Um, why is that still in there? Um, and then some other players that maybe we didn't have the greatest game, but we should still keep on our radar. So one of the first, oh yeah, so the Shrine Bowl in general wasn't the greatest game to watch because the West. I don't know what happened on the
It
West. They made a couple catches, but they just couldn't get a drive to get together.
it's never the greatest game to watch.
25
It
zero.
is strictly
Wow.
a game of you're not watching this for entertainment. You are watching this to scout these guys.
Yeah, because oh man, to be
It's
on the West side and on the offense and not put up any points, the quarterbacks probably took the biggest
first
beating for that.
first shutout in the Shrine Bowl since 1969.
They were even going to go for a field goal late in the game. They're like, just get some points on there. And
They
they're like,
missed it. They missed it. It was wide. It had the distance. It was just wide.
oh man, that's brutal. And then the people that really shined in there would be Arizona's running back. Is it Ja'Cory Cossett Merritt?
Jagori Koski as
Yeah, he
Michael
had.
Rokilo. It's one of his dudes. You know, the
Oh,
Arizona
nice.
connection for him.
What's up, Michael? How you doing, brother? Um, 11 carries, 96 yards, 2 touchdowns. Um, another dude, an Eastern Washington receiver, Mr. Chisholm, Efton Chisholm, was all over the field on that. He just does everything. He's kind of seems like a Julian Edelman, whatever, punt returner, receiver, something out of the backfield.
So Saturday when Shrine Bowl practices started, I put in the group chat. I started talking about Efton Chisholm because immediately he's just standing out. And I will say this: one-on-one drills in these practices are designed to make offensive players look good,
Mm-hmm.
except for offensive line, where the offensive line versus defensive line, where that's made to look defensive line look good. It's not surprising he did well there, but what he did in team drills is what really stood out. He's so quick, so agile. But I posted in the group chat that I have with Nick, Carl, Lance, Dylan, uh, that this dude is going to draw comparisons to Cooper Kupp.
Oh, okay.
Same school, same type of receiver, and about 5 or 6 times during the game, they've made that
yeah.
connection. And with good reason. I mean, there is a lot to like about Chisholm. He is that day 3 wide receiver that I wouldn't mind Denver taking a shot on, just because of what he brings to the offense is very different from any receiver they have.
Mm-hmm.
And he can provide a little bit of insurance on underneath routes. He can work the intermediate. His footwork's really good. And I actually had to send a video of one of the plays because his release looked wonky to me.
Mm-hmm.
But he got off a press release, so I sent the clip to my good friend Luke Pogles, a wide receivers coach, former wide receivers coach now, I think, to get his thoughts on it, and he absolutely loved it. He was praising how good it was, how clean it was. and then and it was consistent after that play. Working on these press drills, you're seeing it a little bit more often. But he is probably one of the biggest standouts from the week overall. Not just the game, not just practice, but every single day and the game he showed up.
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't see him make a tackle. He was like all over the field. He did everything. It was really it's really impressive to see. He's like a lunch pail guy. He'll do whatever it takes to win a game. So I thought that was really awesome. You got Cody W coming in here. He says, "What do you guys think about Bo's bro Tez?" I know that people are giving him a hard time because of his size, but I did hear some positive stuff out of him recently. I kind of caught it in the background as I was doing something. So I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear anything good about Tez recently or any new news?
He killed it during Senior Bowl practices, but he is historically small with historically small hands, which is something that he has to answer for. He's so quick, he's so elusive. He can bring explosive playability to an offense.
Mm-hmm.
He's worth a shot as a 6th, 7th round player, maybe even 5th round. Earlier than that, he's one of those guys that and I've talked to Nick about this, and we talked about it because I joined him Wednesday morning. I ended up
Oh
having
yeah, I
to
saw
join on
that.
Tuesday morning. And we've talked about this. He's one of those guys that if you're taking him before, round 5, I'm okay missing out on him. Just because
Okay.
of bet that you're taking on somebody who is historically small. There have only been, I think, 2 receivers smaller than him in the NFL, and one who's been about the same size.
Has he has he had an injury history because of his size, or is that something that just hasn't happened yet, but it's inevitable? It's bound to he's going to get lit up eventually.
It's more of the latter. Is at that size and taking the beating that you do at the NFL level, where it's stronger and faster. It's one of those things of at that size, he's gonna get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a good odds are he's going to get hurt, and it's not going to be a good one. Um,
What's
but
his what's his size compared to the receiver over out of Philly?
Devontae Smith,
Yeah,
if I remember right, Devontae Smith was 170
because he was a little dude too.
something, and he's like 6 foot flat or something. Let me double check. I'm pulling it up now.
Yeah,
Um,
and that guy's electric. I've always wondered if he was going to get knocked out too, but he finds ways to stay healthy and get out of bounds and get down. I guess
he's built a little bit different. So he's 6 foot, 170 pounds. There's a little bit more meat there on the bones. And everything. And he's just one thing that will help ease concerns with Tez Johnson that kind of did with Devontae Smith is, I don't want to overinflate the importance of it because it's not, it already is, but the 40 time is in as Todd comes in. I was going to mention Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy's 165 pounds. Yeah, it's a little bit
that's
more meat on
insane.
it's a little bit more meat on his bones than 156 pounds. Tez Johnson is the same size as Lance Sanderson. For the record,
8th grader. Wow.
And yeah, it's just one of those things of he either needs this game-breaking speed that Xavier Worthy has, which is where the 40 will come in, or you need to figure out a way to get a little bit more mass on him to protect him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just he's just in this weird spot where he's not quite Xavier Worthy, not quite Devontae Smith. Even though you're going to hear those comparisons made a lot, they're just not the same.
So this is a personally off my own life, whatever. I was before I joined the Army when I was young buck, I was 6'1", 145. I was a stick. And the thing for me was just an actual legit diet.
Mm-hmm.
I ate 3 legit meals a day. I worked out all the time. And by the time after 2 years, I was 190. So I had put on like 45 pounds. And I carried it just fine. It was a little heavier on my legs, whatever, which can cause like shin splints and whatnot. But hopefully he can get there with the nutritionist whatever team he goes to, and to get him to fill out to his a good body weight for himself without being too much weight.
Yeah, and with him too is another thing when you get a guy that small is you want special teams ability. I don't know how much of that there is with him. He's going to get a shot as a punt returner. And the way that you're going to want to make him work, I just don't see it with Denver outside of his connection with Bo Nix being Bo Nix's brother, adopted brother. I just don't see it because he is too similar to what you're getting out of Marvin Mims, who is a couple inches taller and about 30 pounds heavier, who's thicker, built differently. So it's just he's just a tough one because it's a very niche role that you're looking at for him. And some teams can make it work, and it's just a matter of where do you value that. Again, if it's round 5, 6, or 7, I'm fine with Denver taking a shot. Just throw the dart, take that shot. Risk outweighs, or the reward outweighs the risk. If it's higher than that, 4th, 3rd, which I doubt he gets into day 2. But if it's in the 4th round, the risk just might be a little bit more than the reward.
Okay. Well, Roy came in here for a question with you, or for you. It says, "Hey there, KB, Eric, and Scott." Scott's not here, unfortunately, but he's with us in heart. I heard Scott's take on Gray Zabel. What's your take on him, Eric? Is that a tackle out of Western Michigan, or not Western?
North Dakota State.
Okay.
Love him. Best player during the week of practices.
Wow.
At the very least, best offensive lineman. He primarily worked inside as a guard center, which everybody knew he was. He just doesn't have the length for the tackle at the NFL level. But he came in and was snapping balls on day 1 as a center. And it was a day where there were a lot of miscues and botched snaps between center and quarterback. And I think there was one from him, and it's his first time playing center.
Oh, okay. And the Shrine Bowl was bad. Did you see the
Shrine Bowl was really bad as well? Yeah.
I felt bad for that North Dakota State quarterback. One of them wasn't his fault. One of them was his fault. And both were just brutal. And hats off to that guy. Of all the quarterbacks they could pick, they picked a guy from North Dakota State. He looked poised. He just wasn't. He's a backup, I guess you would say.
Yeah. But yeah, with Gray Zabel, he's a guy that he's not the. I actually wrote up my 8 standouts from the week of practice for the Senior Bowl. It's not live yet, but I'll give a little blurb out of it. He's not the sexy pick, but if the Broncos want to lock in their offensive line for 2 years at 20, yeah, because he's not going to be there at the 2nd round pick. Not saying they do that. I'm saying if they want to, because right now you can do with upgrading over Luke Wattenberg or Alex Forsyth. And then that buys you 2 years of a set offensive line before you then have to reevaluate with Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey.
I know you could probably pay those guys like in cattle and horses. They're all farmer type dudes like Quinn Miners.
Fun fact with him though, his NIL money, Gray Zabel actually went and bought farmland, and he's starting up a farming business as well.
That's what's up. Awesome. Hopefully he knows about it. He just didn't see like Yellowstone.
It was his degree.
Okay.
I don't know the actual term for it, but his degree in college dealt with that. So
it reminded me of Von Miller. He's got a poultry degree from A&M, so he's got a big chicken farm. Another standout was a Tyler Batty, BYU defensive line.
Tyler Batty.
His name called him a number of times, and he was giving them issues all game.
Again, going to the group chat for it. I think it was on Sunday's practice, the 2nd day of practice. I think I was just constantly down on him. I was negative remark after negative remark. And he was rushing exclusively off the left tackle at that point. Then they flipped sides. And it was like after that, including next days, either side, he won every single one. It was like something just clicked and it just turned on, and it didn't matter who was blocking him. It didn't matter what side. There was a couple times where they even moved him inside, running in as a sub package interior defensive lineman, and he was in the backfield and won his rep. He was a guy who started out rough and really turned it around and put together a solid week.
That's awesome. I love when people you don't want to get on down on themselves and it just like landslide mistake after mistake. And it's nice if somebody can pick themselves up and not only get back on track but shine.
Yeah, and that's
All
one of those. And
no,
real
you
quick,
go.
that's one of those things that NFL teams are looking for. Do you start out rough and bounce back? Do you start out great and fall apart? Are you consistent? Like they look at these things, and it's part of the evaluation for them.
And I know Shadur didn't play, but they had a couple interviews with him, and he sounded sharp. He's always sounded sharp to me. He's never rattled by the moment. He just seems like he's just hanging out with his boys. And I really love him and Cam Ward's rapport with each other. It's
And
so funny. They talk so much trash to each other. He's like, "Oh, you got number one?" He's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, what did he say? What did he say? Did you hear that one? He said about having number one. He's like, "Oh, Cam Ward's like, oh, they just gave it to me." He's like, "Oh, you just get stuff given to you, I guess, huh?" And it was like, "Oh."
I do find it noteworthy that Shadur Sanders, he wasn't planning on practicing in the first place, but he got there with the meetings. He met with the Titans, the Giants, and the Browns, the teams with the first 3 picks, and reportedly all 3 teams were telling him, "Don't practice.
Yeah, they told him not to play. Yeah,
Don't." Like, and so that is extremely noteworthy. That all 3 of the top 3 teams were telling him that.
which is kind of crazy that nobody brought that up. Really, like I heard about that, but I heard about it way later. Before that, I heard all this trash talk about how
Yeah,
he isn't playing. And it's like I wish they would have did help
and
him out there.
his brother was awful.
Yeah, I watched him. I was pretty
His brother
sad.
was awful. Uh, practices are hard. Practices are hard for defensive backs at linebackers. The only thing that practices are good, only position on defense is the defensive line. They're the only ones where they have the advantage of in these reps. And yeah, despite that, he still managed to look beyond terrible, and it carried over into the game. He's a guy that coming in was maybe you can rise up day 3 a little bit. He's kind of like the 6th, 7th round guy, maybe undrafted. Now he's probably thinking of 7th or undrafted.
Yeah, he didn't seem like he was like ahead of the game, whatever. He seemed like he was reacting. He was always a step too slow. I saw one of them where they had like a zone coverage and the guy came across. It might have been, I think it was the other guy, whatever. Shiloh smashed into a linebacker randomly, and then the guy broke out, and then I think it was a touchdown.
Yeah.
It was a miscommunication probably between both of them, so it could have been both their fault. But yeah, it didn't look good for him. Everything was getting caught. He just, if you watched him last year, I feel like it was almost he should have came out last year. He still wasn't he's still not like an NFL start or whatever. But at the end of the day, I feel like his big splash plays last year would have got him on a team. He would have gave him a chance, and he would have had the confidence. I feel like he's lacking in confidence right now too. He's playing like he's hesitating.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's tough. Last year's safety class was a little bit better, so I understand wanting to go back, and he just had a down year and didn't turn out well, which is a shame because this is a weak safety class. There are some guys at the top. There's a handful of guys at the top. There's a handful of guys at that second, third tier, and then there's a huge drop off for the rest of these guys. So this was a big opportunity for him to step up and have a good game, and he didn't. There was one safety from Arizona State who, in practice, he managed to look good, but again, the way practices are, it's hard to evaluate safeties. But he carried it over with the game. Into the game,
Yeah.
the way he was reading plays, breaking before the ball was thrown, breaking before the running backs out of the hole, and just a lot of good plays. Can't remember his name, but he's out of Arizona State.
Oh, was it? No,
Shamari Simmons.
Yes, I saw him. Yeah, I had him on my list. I don't know, got mixed up in there. But yeah, Simmons was in every single play, and he was laying down some wood. Like he was smashing some people. They were all every single one of his hits were there were some sound effects.
There was a great play. If I wouldn't get in trouble, I'd actually pull it up because I have it saved and show it. But he's the single high safety because the strong safety kind of pulled down into the box a little bit to take on a tight end. He rotated over and he was following a shallow crosser underneath, and he's reading the quarterback, and he turns, so he's getting pulled. So he's following the crosser this way. He's getting pulled this way. There's a guy who ran up and around, and he reads the quarterback hitting that guy, and he just comes over, flips his hips rather smoothly, gets underneath it, gets a big interception. And it's plays like that, if you're a safety, that you make to stand out, because those are translatable skills that you can carry over to the NFL. Those are showing things that you want to see, that you can show in these types of settings. And it was just it was a phenomenal play. It wasn't his only play that he made either, but that was the one that was like, okay, you got my attention now.
That reminds me of the Ed Reed play that Bill Belichick breaks down with where he
Yeah.
tricks Peyton Manning. That's that's knowledge. That's not athleticism. That's because you are just a better football player.
And he got praised constantly, like turning into the live streams, which I gotta just real quick. It stinks living in Alaska this time of year because Shrine Bowl practices started at 6 a.m. my time. And I'm a guy who I'm normally in bed until about 10.
Okay,
so
yeah.
early mornings, long days. That's what led to 20-hour work days here. But during the broadcast of it, the one thing that was constantly brought up for him was he is a grinder. His nose was in the books the whole time, constantly picking it up. He is one of a few guys that they talked about of, as soon as he got found out who the coaches were, he started watching their NFL teams
Oh
tape to
yeah.
try to get an idea of it. Another guy is the Minnesota quarterback, Max Bosmer, I think, or Bosmer, or something like that, who had a terrible game. And not a great
He had
week.
the big beaver on the side of his helmet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gopher.
Yeah.
But yeah, he got a lot of praise for that. But we have Max coming in with a $2 donation out of Canada. Any centers that stood out to you guys? Go Broncos. At the Shrine Bowl, no. Shrine Bowl, it was a mess from the centers. Gus Hartwig and Joe Huber, they were on the ground a lot. They did both have slightly better games than they did practices, but not enough to be like, these are guys that are, can be difference makers or starters in this team. These are guys that you're looking at as, we'll bring them as an undrafted free agent. We'll let them compete and see what they can do, but they're probably just, a camp body. Senior Bowl is filled with center options.
Okay.
Bunch of small school guys. We talked about Zabel already, but there's Clay Webb, there's Jackson Slater. There is a hold on, I got to pull it up because I can never. Jacob Bayer, who also had a really good game. And then not small school, but Willie Lampkin. He's 5'10", 270 pounds for an interior offensive lineman. That's not ideal, but this dude has been having a great week. He's not getting talked about enough, especially when you factor in his size. On day one, he went against 6'6", 340-pound Cameron Jackson out of Florida. Lost the first rep, didn't lose again. Went against him twice that day, won the second one, went against him twice on day two, beat him both times, went against him 3 times on day 3, beat him all 3 times. Just shut him down, didn't allow any movement. And listening to, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah talk about it. It might have been Charles Davis. I'm pretty sure it was NFL Network at the very least. During one of their broadcasts, is because of his size, he knows that he's undersized. He focused on making sure he understands leverage and the techniques that go with it, and you can see it with the way he works.
I was going to ask that too. With his shorter size, I wonder if he's able to get a better base and he can anchor himself in there better. And it's just harder to tip him over.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's kind of what it is with him. But yeah, and he's a guy that you could, like, day 3, it's a similar situation with Tez Johnson, different positions, but these guys are historically small. If somebody wants to take them earlier than, say earlier than top, or it's somewhere in the top 150, I'll just put a number on it. I'm fine missing out on them in that range, but if they fall after that, if they fall to 175 to 225 and I have a couple picks there, I'll take a shot on these historically small guys and see what they can do, because they've shown enough on the football field of what you can use to make them work and how they can play. And you can always, try different things to make them work. If Willie Lampkin isn't cutting it at center, maybe you just make him, this big fullback body, this Ricard type guy, or use him as that 6th offensive lineman. Different situations, different ways you can use them if you can't cut it at center.
I like Ricard too. I like those big fullbacks that actually impact the game.
Fullbacks.
Yeah, use check.
Yeah.
Dope. Some other interesting players to watch are to look at. This was in the Shrine Bowl, I guess. Was Joshua Simmons, tight end out of South Carolina, with 40 receptions, 500 yards, 519 yards, and 7 touchdowns. 6'4", 259. I'm not sure about his blocking, but he had some decent size to him for it wasn't one of those 230-pound tight ends, so that's nice.
I'll
Um,
say this with him: he was in my book, in my opinion, he was the best tight end at the Shrine Bowl, and by far the best blocker.
okay,
He
awesome.
didn't lose a single rep as a blocker, and I don't think of all the other tight ends between both rosters, I think there were maybe 3 wins by the tight ends combined.
Jeez.
It
Okay.
was a rough showing from him, but he was the best one. Um, yeah, there was a lot to like about his blocking ability. Didn't show a lot as a receiver, um, in during drills. Some clunky movements during the receiving drills and stuff like that. The one-on-ones against safeties and running back or linebackers. Um, had a couple catches in team drills, but it was the short safety net guy um, that just got open quickly, and there's 3, 4, 5 yards going your way, but the blocking
Okay.
really stood out.
That's what's up. And then with the other gentleman we talked about earlier, Nebraska's D lineman Nash was a
Hutmacher.
Hutmacher? Yeah, Hutmacher. 4-year state champion in wrestling in high school. It was like 161-0. It's got to be a huge advantage for him when he's with the leverage and his hand movements and everything to do with being a defensive lineman on the inside. I really loved him, and you were talking about how he just eats up linemen.
Yeah, he is impossible to move. During the week of practice, it is easier to tell you which defensive linemen struggled rather than did well because they were on both teams. They were just absolutely killing it. But he is one of those guys who he had a great week of practice. He's not much of a pass rusher. Um, he can generate some push in the pocket, but he is a guy that he can sit there and be unmoved. When I don't want to say be, because in the NFL, obviously the game's going to get stronger. In the Shrine Bowl practices, in the game, and the team drills, he was immovable against double teams. They just could not get any movement on him. He would just sit there in the hole and make the running backs change their mind. It was phenomenal to watch. Technique is so clean, and with offensive linemen and defensive linemen, you like wrestlers because they know how to hand fight. They know that hand combat.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been watching him since he played CU, and he had a really good game against CU. But yeah, I just love the wrestlers. The wrestlers just I don't know, they have a little bit of an advantage over everybody else.
Mm.
It's almost like when you had those guys that were dancers or ballet, whatever, and they were
Ballet is
receivers.
another one because it helps with footwork for receivers and for offensive linemen,
Oh, okay,
tackles especially.
I remember the receivers because it taught them how to land
Yep.
without injuring themselves, essentially.
It's a softer way to land, and then with offensive tackles, it's about being lighter on your feet.
I would love to see that. Those practices. It's just
Can we
like
get
quick minors.
like some ballet teacher and just videotape the Broncos offensive linemen doing ballet? I would
Or
watch that. That would be funny to watch, especially with the personalities the Broncos have on their offensive line.
that would be hilarious. And she's just like scolding him.
Here we have this little 5'10", 5'11" ballet dancer to all these 6'3", 6'4", 330+ pound dudes. Like, it'd be funny. That would be such a treat to watch.
That would be awesome. Um, so what else we got in here? Um, I did see some CU players in there. Just more earlier in the game with the receiver wise with Will Shepherd. I guess no Webster played the entire game pretty much. Or West is it Wester? It's Wester. I thought it
It's
was
Webster,
Webster.
I think.
I thought it was Webster forever. Both those guys played all right. Will Shepherd had a nice little back shoulder fade catch. Another one they threw to him was a little off, but he would have caught that. I feel like if it would have been on the money. I really do like Will Shepherd. I think he can get a little shaky with his hands, like how Sutton has been every once in a while. But he possesses everything that Sutton possesses. Could be a really cheap option for a replacement down the road if Sutton does want 25 mil a year. I think he just possesses everything that he can do. So, and he played in the SEC before they played at CU. So he played some big time schools.
The CU receiver that stood out, well, Wester, the first day of practice, he was one of those guys. He was unstoppable. Just because in 1-1-1 drills, these short, shifty guys, every single year you hear them hyped up. It's a drill made for them to be successful. It's why I'm not trying to, jump on this because I've seen quite a bit of this. Tez Johnson, top 100 player because of what he did in the Senior Bowl one-on-ones. Well, that's made for him to be successful. Wester ate that up as well. But then when he got to team drills, he kind of disappeared a little bit. And it was a bummer. On special teams during the game, he fair caught a lot. And it's one of those situations of like, I mean, you want to protect yourself, but you also want to show what you can do as a returner. And you're not going to get all these opportunities. So you got to try to do something. And going back to Chisholm, he did that. On the first punt he had 3 guys surrounding him and didn't for a catch it, picked up like 6 yards on the return for it. Not a lot, but he tried to show something.
Yeah.
Jimmy Horn was the receiver during practice that I think looked the best.
Jimmy Horn is quick. I don't know. He's going to run a 4.3, I feel like.
He's quick, he's agile, and one of the things is if you need somebody who can get separation in his route in an instant because of how sharp the cuts are, he is one of those guys. He stops on a dime, he snaps his route off, and he's open. And for a quarterback like Bo Nix with what he can bring, that can really work with it.
Yeah, I really liked his relationship with Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. I remember at CSU, I think it was like he dropped the ball or he made a critical error in the game, not only to come back and win. Well, then Deion Sanders pulled him aside. He's like, "Hey, man, it's all right, man." And he like worked him back up, got him back in the game, and they ended up catching the game-tying touchdown with like 14 seconds left in the game.
Phil coming in, thank you for reminding me about this. I saw it earlier and then just got sidetracked on about other things. Apologize for that, Phil. But he's saying, good evening, Kenneth and Eric. Are we really thinking about Aaron Jones? I think he's a little too old. Thoughts? Depending on cost, I wouldn't mind taking a shot his way. I mean, you basically got to rework the room or rebuild the room. And I don't think Estime or McLaughlin showed enough to guarantee them a role on the offense next year. So bring in guys, let them compete, pick the best 4, go on.
Yeah, it's all about production. If he can produce, I'd like to bring him in at the right price. Because yeah, I mean, it's like Latavius Murray, whatever. Even if I know he was at a low price, whatever, but he produces. So you got to bring in people who produce. Like because our guys, they're just too shaky right now, and they're gonna have to prove themselves in preseason and then training camp and stuff like that. Because you don't even know if they'll be on the team next year. I know Jaleel he played really well. I was really impressed with Jaleel, but you can't have him as your bell cow, whatever, I guess.
He had a great close to the season, but it's like he needed to step up and be this big play guy pretty consistently throughout it. And it wasn't until the final 5-6 games where we really got that out of him. I think he is the one guy that's like, I would be surprised if he's not on part of this offense next year. Audric Estime as a 5th round pick. I mean, he still has a lot to show. But I mean, I think there's a good chance that both are. You can't replace 4 running backs in a single season. But I mean, you can bring guys in to compete and just go with the best 4. Cody W comes in with another donation, $5. Thank you, Cody. We appreciate that. It says, what do you think about Oronde Gadsden, the tight end from Syracuse? He is fast and a really good catch radius.
I did look him up. Is he like with the same numbers pretty much as the other dude with like the 7 touchdowns kind of situation?
Yeah, he has really good good stats. He's definitely a receiving tight end. He is not a blocker.
He's a good quarterback too.
Yep. The issue with him is they're from the Shrine Bowls exclusively, since that's what we're talking about. It's Shrine Senior Bowl. There are a lot of notes in mind that he should have had the cut if he would fight through the linebacker. He just allows himself to get bullied. He doesn't use his size at all. There were times where he was set up to take on, a safety or a defensive back in as a blocker and didn't really do that. I was high on him coming in. I still like him a lot. I'm not, what they do at the Senior Bowl, what they do at the Shrine Bowl doesn't make or break my evaluation. There's a lot of hours that go, or a lot of time that goes into all these other stuff. But I think this was a chance where he could have really worked himself up into a top 125 pick. there's still a slight chance for that just because of what he can do as a receiver. But I would say that, 125 to 175 at this time is more likely, and the combine can still change things. So it's very fluid at the moment.
It's like one of those guys you got to bully bully them so bad until they finally fight back.
Yeah.
Until they're just like they're not gonna take it anymore and be like, I knew that person was inside. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, grow some, just like you're a gigantic man. Like, show it. Yeah, I don't know, because that's as a kid, I don't know. I've had situations like that where eventually you get bullied over the top to where you don't care. Like like my brother used to kind of bully me as a kid. And then one time I just like, I don't care if I lose this fight. I know I'm gonna lose this fight, but I'm not gonna take this anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what you
But
gotta
yeah,
do.
there was one play where he was in the back of the end zone and he had really good position on it, and he stops, and the linebacker's just able to catch up and make a play to break it up. And instead of trying to fight through to make the catch, instead Gadsden tries to make the catch behind the linebacker's back when he actually had good position to try to, get in front of it, fight for the ball a little bit, attack the ball.
Like
I
reaching
hear
over
about that
instead of
receiver.
just
Yeah,
going
he
through 'em.
puts his hands around the back and tries to catch it, giving the linebacker a hug and catch the ball. You just got to fight through it a little bit, and that's something that was rough. But Shrine Bowl in general was rough on tight ends. And then speaking of tight ends, Todd Ossendorf coming in asking about Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. I'm surprised about that. That you heard that he was struggling, because everything that I've seen is that he looked good, and then what I saw was that he looked good. On the field. Not a blocker. He's this big slot more so than anything. Not going to use him in line. But he gets open. And he and the Oregon tight end, Terrence Ferguson. Ferguson, I think, offers a little bit more as a blocker, not as near as much upside as a receiver. But both of them had some missed opportunities. Not all their fault. Some of the throws these quarterbacks were giving were awful.
Yeah, and Fannin too is like, who do you think led the country in receiving yards last year? Was it a receiver? Was it Travis Hunter? Was it Nick Nash? No, it was Fannin.
Yeah,
he had 1,555 yards or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. Is that somebody they're just gonna eventually convert into a bigger slot and not even and just told to give up on the tight end because it's like
I think
don't know.
that's what they're talking about with him. Period. Is that you're not a tight end. You are you're just a big receiver, and I think that's the way he's going to be used and utilized at the NFL level.
Is his route train everything good enough to be a receiver, you think, in the NFL?
So I don't think he's going to be like, sorry, word here. Right way to put this. I don't think he's going to be like a full-time, like, you're just the receiver. Here's the receiver group. Go hang out with them. He's just going to be this tight end that lines up in the slot as a big slot. And if you see him lined up in line, it's going to be working as an extension of the passing game. So it's just he runs, his routes are pretty solid. There are some bigger receivers that we've seen in the NFL who run far worse routes than he does. But he's not a guy that we're going to go put you on the boundary and let you go survive out there. Big slot and some inline work as a receiver.
I had a question. So Mark comes in here. Mark Hoynak. How you doing, Mark? I don't know. I don't recognize that name. If it's your first time, welcome to the room. Said, would you give up a first round pick for Wilson? Garrett Wilson over at the Jets. I heard something crazy. So apparently he's starting to follow all the Broncos now. He's following Bo Nix. He's following all the big people, whatever, which is kind of silly. It's like what they said on 104.3. It's like a teenage little girl kind of thing, like how Courtland Sutton stopped following the Broncos last year, whatever. When it's like, come on, man.
It's agents advise players to do things like that at times for contract negotiations. Garrett Wilson is up for a contract negotiation, and there was talk that he wanted out. And now that there's no coaching staff coming in, it sounds like Aaron Rodgers has a good chance of being on his way out. Devontae Adams is likely on his way out. I think they're trying to do what they can to keep Garrett Wilson. and then as well as extending him. Would I give the Jets our first rounder for Garrett Wilson? Yes, I would.
Yeah, just the first round.
I wouldn't do more than that, but
he reminds me of Cortland Sutton, like where he's not like body type, whatever, but where they were both the first few years in the league, they didn't have any quarterback. They had no quarterback stability, and they were still getting 1,000-yard seasons. So I'd like to see him with an actual legit quarterback and a really good offense coordinator.
Yeah. Hey, Cristiano Roden, we haven't had a first round pick in a while. Bo Nix. But I get where you're coming from with this. We've had one in the last few years, Bo Nix, and you want that young guy, but Garrett Wilson is still young. It's just I think the bigger issue with trading that first round pick for Garrett Wilson is that you're going to do that and then hand him a big contract.
Yeah, then you have to pay him. Yeah,
that's my bigger issue with it. I would still do it because receiver is one of those positions that are absolutely vital for quarterbacks to take the next step. And I am still not overly fond of the Broncos wide receiver room. So I would still do it. And but yeah, I think the contract is the bigger issue with it, especially with the way this receiver class looks. I think that and last thing is, and not just receiver room, but draft overall, I don't think you're getting a player with his potential, or I don't want to say potential, but of his caliber, with the potential to have that same caliber as him, the same kind of impact as him, in the first round on the offensive side of the ball.
Okay. Yeah, it's that's the pushback between him and Chris Godwin. Is Chris Godwin's just the money, where Garrett Wilson's the money and the pick. That's going to cost you. Yeah, it's we'll see. I'm excited to see who they pick up. Hopefully, it's not a bunch of like retreads this offseason, and that we do not maybe a splash move in free agency, but at least in the draft, get somebody really nice. I know that you were talking about the receiver out of Ohio State being a first round talent, but you weren't comfortable taking him in the first round, just I guess based on what the team needs and whatnot. But I've been looking into him more, and I really do. I like him a lot too. It was a how do you say is it a Jogbu or how do you?
I'm terrible with pronunciations.
Yeah. I can look it up.
So I don't want to butcher it up because I always feel bad for butchering some of these names up. And
I feel like if you try and you're like, hey, I'm sorry first, you really can't get mad at the person because I don't know, they're trying to say it.
I mean, I typically put together a guide for it, and I do got to give a shout out to Louisville and Iowa for their football rosters, because they have an audio thing that you can click to hear the pronunciation of some of these names.
Oh, okay.
So the quarterback for Louisville, his last name is Sough. How do you think it's pronounced?
Sough, like saw? Or
it's Shook.
Shook?
It's Shook. It's pronounced Shook. Tyler Shook.
Okay. I don't know where the K
I was flabbergasted when I saw that, because I never in my right mind would have thought about it. So yeah, it's just funny to me about it, but I do try to be, names are important, and calling people by their name is important, and saying it correctly is important. And there are a lot of names that I butcher, and for the longest time I didn't know this until after Lance and I did a show after he passed away. But DT, I still say his name wrong to this day.
Really, Demarius?
Yep, it's Demarius. I always say Demarius.
Oh, okay.
And I know it's not right. And it's just a
maybe it is though. You never know. Like some people just maybe it's supposed to be pronounced one certain way, but the family pronounces it one way.
Yeah. And we already had enough of that with Beatty, Batty, Bidet. We already had enough of that this
season. Yeah. Is there anybody else that you saw in these games that you're really hyped about, or?
There's a lot of guys that I'm excited for with the Senior Bowl. I'm super excited for that game.
And that's today or tomorrow?
That's tomorrow.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
it's early in the morning for you.
It's a 9 a.m. wake up call for me. which isn't that big of a deal, but I
I'm a
like my
UFC
sleep. I
guy.
stay up late and get sleep late. So,
I'm a UFC
but
guy, and they're in like Saudi Arabia or something like that. So
yeah.
they're starting at like 6 in the morning on Saturday.
But at the Shrine Bowl, um, a lot of defensive linemen. Like we could have easily spent an hour talking about the defensive linemen from the Shrine Bowl because of how good they looked. But it's always tough because you always counter that with the offensive line. Are they that bad? And I think this year that is the case. The
Oh,
offensive line was just that bad this year. Outside of a few guys, a couple small school guys really stood out there. Marcus Ware out of Montana State, and Thomas Perry out of William and Mary? No, Middlebury. And then there was a guy out of Lindenwood who also looked pretty solid. Not as good as the other two. Um, trying to look here. Uh, we don't really need to talk about quarterbacks, but quarterbacks at the Shrine Bowl were not great. There's a Canadian kid at the Senior Bowl who was very intriguing. Basically won the Canadian version of the Heisman Trophy, having to adjust to the way the NFL is. You know, the field size, the field difference, the difference in what receivers can do. Because in Canada football, they have that guy rushing up for the snap, um, and you don't have that. He's been very intriguing with that. There's a lot of Jackson Dart talk, but I mean, listening to him
oh
struggle
yeah.
to make the calls, some very questionable stuff with his mechanics and stuff. I think the best quarterback at the Senior Bowl has been Riley Leonard.
Oh, okay.
Um, Jalen Milroe is not a quarterback. Um, I'm trying to think of some others. Offensive line, defensive lineman. Um, Michael coming in. Toledo defensive player, Darius Alexander, phenomenal kid. Um, they rushed him from. So you have your techniques on the defensive line. Zero technique is on your center. Wide nine is like on the outside shoulder of a tight inline tight end. They lined him up from zero technique to wide nine, and he won at every single spot.
Wow.
He played everywhere. He's got length, he's got size, he's got power, quickness, agility. He is one of the few guys that took Gray Zabel to task. Um,
Oh, okay.
I was a fan of his coming in. I think I was looking at him, somewhere in the third round. Um, I think top 50 has a good chance at this point. Of course, things are fluid. A lot of still can change between now and then. Combine's another important factor. He's been praised for his work ethic, been praised for his leadership. Um, but yeah, it's just he was just so fun to watch.
And then we already answered this earlier. I never answered a question from Twitch. Black Knight talks about what about the receiver from Nix's family? How did he look? He looked really good in the drills, but like they're saying that they're kind of the drills are made for receivers that are shifty like that. So we'll see. He's very slight of frame. He's gonna have to put on some weight. Hopefully, um, at least in the 175 range, which is extremely small in the NFL still. But we'll see how he does. We're all rooting for him. And then Eric was talking about was it seventh round, seventh round?
Sixth, seventh round, yeah.
He wouldn't mind taking a chance on that. Fourth round or higher is probably a no-go on that. It's a little too high. It's a little too rich. Thanks for
Yeah, I
joining us,
mean,
Black Knight from Twitch.
yeah, and there is a route in team drills that is still on my mind because it was a great route. Um, it wasn't like he had sharp breaks or anything. It was just subtle movements that created separation, and it was for a big gain. Um, there's a lot to like about him. If he wasn't historically small, we would be talking. If he was 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, we would be talking about him in the second, third round, like because of the skill set that he has.
That's rough. It's like, I mean, he can control the weight. It's not the height. Or like, what
Yeah.
is that? There's a Facebook post where this girl's like, "Oh, guys that are short, go to the gym, lazy," or something like that. And you're just like, you realize you don't get taller by going to work out, right?
So what needs to happen is I
Sorry,
need
that
to
was
meet up with Tez Johnson and help him with the eating habits to gain weight while he helps me shrink down.
yeah. Michael Rockula comes in here saying this is the 26th anniversary of the Denver Broncos back-to-back Super Bowl championships. Oh, man, those were the days. We were just unstoppable. The run game, we had we weren't the greatest on defense, but we had defensive pieces that were legit. Like we had some good pass rush, we had some good linebackers, some decent secondary guys. But that the offense of all those receiving weapons, and then having Terrell Davis on top of that, and then John Elway to quarterback the whole thing is insane. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever be lucky again. That was just so cool to be a part of. I was so hyped for that game. It was me, for the first one, and then me, my cousin, and my cousin Eva, and my cousin Joe, who recently passed. But we were so hyped because we can't watch the game with a bunch of people. We're kind of in our own little thing. And man, what a great few years in. They should have been three-peats too. They should have won in '96 if they didn't blow it against the Jaguars.
Yeah. It's out of my memory. 26 years ago at this time, I was 7.
Already worked for Mile High Huddle.
I was 7. I had to have been 7. I just turned 33. I had to have been 7. It's been a long week, guys. Sorry about that. Math is not my strong suit at the moment. But so I don't remember it a whole lot, and that was before I was super into football as well. But it's awesome that it's the 26th anniversary of that. It's also the 15th anniversary for something or another, and I can't remember what.
The Black Knight talks about, I wish we would have three-peated. Yeah. Then we would have had that over KC. Because the KC fans are crazy. They act like they've been winning Super Bowls. I mean, they have been winning them recently, like a lot. So, but before that, it was like, I don't know, 70 years or something like that. But they act like they were the Patriots. But now they kind of are. So I really can't say anything now.
Before we get out of here, because we're running out of time, so if you guys have any burning questions, get them in. I always hate saying this part of it, but super chats and stars are the way to make sure we do get to your questions. But Phil McLaughlin coming in, what's your projection for the Super Bowl? Will KC three-peat? I'll say my projection and prediction for next week. I will say this: I saw this interesting thing yesterday, talking about when the Super Bowl is held in a location that is between the two teams, where one has to travel east, one has to travel west. The team traveling west has won every single time since 2000.
Yeah, okay.
Eagles are the team that's traveling west. Kansas City traveling east. And I will say that is what I hope happens. I do not want a three-peat from Kansas City. Their fans are already insufferable enough.
Definitely. And it's, the things that have to happen for me to get that, it's going to break my heart because I think Saquon only needs 35 yards to have more yards. The best season-wise. But I would say it would be more 185 yards he needs because he's had more games.
Yeah.
But for them to beat the Chiefs, he's going to have a 150-plus yard game. And I think he's 100% he can do that. He can 100% do that. But let's see. AJ Brown's they can't forget AJ Brown. I don't know. I'm excited. We'll see if they win. Did you make any bets or did you do any squares by chance? Or I did squares, so I have some numbers, whatever. So hopefully I can win some money. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up then?
No, but you mentioned the game thing, and this is actually just a curious thought before we get out of here. So obviously more games now than there were back then. But Ed Dickerson, he got all those yards on more carries, almost 30 more carries.
Eric Dickerson did?
Yeah, than Saquon Barkley did. So, I understand the whole thing about games, but I honestly think that when we come to things like that, is you got to look at the attempts. Especially in this day and age where back then, guys would break their leg, they'd put a splint on it and go back out there. It's a bit of a hyperbole, but
I've seen people
they'd get concussed and go back out there.
Knocked completely unconscious and go back in the game.
So with injuries being more damaging, in a way, I do think that you got to look at how many carries it took to get there more so than games. Personally, but we do have one quick donation coming in from Todd. Awesome. Thank you, Todd, for that. round 1 tight end, round 2 running back, round 3 tight end, round 4 running back. Would you be happy if that happened or think it was a waste? It's a waste. Sign 1, draft 1. If you're double dipping, double dip 1 early and day 1, day 2, and then take 1. Use one of those 6-round picks.
If there's a Kelsey and a Saquon Barkley mixed in there, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, it's.
Those are game changers.
I also think that tight end 1 is closer to tight end 5 than a lot of people do. I am not on the whole Warren or Loveland or bust at 20.
Mm-hmm.
I am very much go defense round 1.
Okay.
And then draft the tight end, running back round 2, round 3. Personally. But yeah, if you use your first 4 picks on tight end, running back, then you significantly failed in free agency. You don't draft for needs. You sign for needs. You draft for the future. The only exception to that is quarterback. Quarterback is a position where you draft for the need because of the fact that it's practically impossible to fill the need in free agency.
Yeah, because they'd stay with their team or they're not good.
They get extended. Very rarely do they not. So yeah, I think it would be a waste.
Oh, and my last thing I had was like a kind of around the news, but Michael Parsons was talking to Paulo Banchero. He's a really good basketball player for Orlando who knows about all the different contracts of the different sports. And he talked about Saquon. I forgot what year it was. He was making like 13 mil. Is he making 13 mil now or something like that?
I'm not sure.
But he was like, Paulo Banchero was like, that's what the 7th dude on our bench makes. And he was talking about just the pay discrepancy between the two sports, and the guaranteed contracts and whatnot. And if all the sports that should get guaranteed contracts, I feel like hockey and football, like you're more likely to like end up in a wheelchair.
Well, didn't one dude die playing hockey like a year ago or so?
I don't know. I know Avalanche got his throat cut. It barely missed his.
Didn't a player like get his throat cut? I don't pay attention to hockey. I remember seeing something like that in the news. I don't know the full story of it. If somebody in the chat does.
One guy was skated off holding his neck and it was barely hanging on.
Yeah.
If it would have tore it, you would have bled out.
Oh, but I mean, maybe with Patrick Mahomes and, the flopping that he does, maybe we'll get guaranteed contracts for that. Got to bring in.
Just bring down the contracts like lower, but just guarantee them.
It's I don't know. NFL should do something. I'll just say that. It's tough. I don't know what they should do. It's not my job to figure out what they should do, but something should happen. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us. We appreciate everybody jumping in and supporting us, tuning in, commenting, superstars, super chats. But before we get out of here, there are some things that you can do to help us out, starting with making sure you're following us on all the things. You could follow us on Twitter, at Erick Trickel, at
Kenneth _MHH.
It's not on the screen, so I don't know it. And I was sitting here trying to figure out where it was at, and I couldn't find it at the moment.
I think it's because it's thicker.
And then you got at MHH Pod on Twitter, at MHH, at DVDD_pod. You can follow all those on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. There it is, the at Mile High Huddle. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod, facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. And there is a fan page there as well. I just can't remember the name of that. If you want some merchandise like this hat and the shirt that I had on until I spilled something all over it, you can go to mhhmerch.com. We've got all kinds of shirts like the Dove Valley Divers shirts that I was wearing, the hats, we got mugs, all sorts of stuff. You guys can go there. You can follow us on Instagram at Mile High Huddle with an underscore between mile and high and huddle. And if you are unable to do that, if you're unable to, donate through stars, super chat, buying merch, whatever the case may be, there are some things that you can do that only take a matter of time, and they are such a big help, especially this time of year. One of them is you can go to Spotify or Apple, your favorite podcast that we site that we're on, or a group, whatever you want to call it, app, and leave a 5-star review. Not only does that help us out, it also helps you out. It gives you a chance to win some merchandise, not swag, each month. I did almost say it, but it helps you. It gives you guys a chance to earn that. But at the very least, you guys can subscribe, like, and share. though that is the easiest way to help us out. It just takes a matter of time, especially now that the season is over, and we've been dealing with algorithm changes. Subscribing, liking, shares help to help us with the algorithm through the algorithm changes, help get us into more viewers, and help us continue to come up with ideas and do things that we've talked about behind the scenes to try to bring new content, better content, all sorts of stuff like that. And another way that you can help with that is commenting down below. You can leave questions, comments, whatever it is of what we can do better, things like that, as well. And that again helps us with the algorithms on all these different places to fight through the changes of the algorithms that are coming that are so frustrating. Before we get out of here, though, any last words?
So I like to break down these videos and make them into little small clips with specific questions and putting polls underneath, and I'll post it on my X. You guys go and check those out and vote on the stuff, like what tight end you want, who you want to pick first, stuff like that. So we can all just kind of, I don't know, participate together on building this Bronco team back to a championship team. And I would really love if you guys participate in that, and I appreciate it. And throw me a follow on X. Still trying to pump those numbers. I think I'm the way lowest on the group, but would appreciate if a follow. And yeah, and enjoy your weekend. Have a great weekend. The weather's finally nicer out here, so it's nice.
Yep. Enjoy your weekend. Have fun. Stay safe. Don't drink and drive. Senior Bowl tomorrow. Make sure you guys tune into that. Make sure you pay attention to MHH for all the content that's to come about it and the draft in general. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Don't drink and drive. And we will be back next Friday.